Today's lesson, we're going to talk a little bit about conversation with Christ, and that's the lesson we're going to be talking about today. So, the key verse we're going to be in John 3 through 1 through 21. He says the key verse is he that believeth on him is not condemned, but he that believeth not is condemned already, because he has not believed in the name of the only begotten Son of God. And our lesson objective today is to seek that everyone, even the outward regions, must be born again, to marvel at God's gift of His Son for our redemption, and to learn the lesson of putting our faith in God. Well, before I start reading there, I'm going to just go back and read these lessons objectives right here, and I'm going to talk just a second about it. It says, to see that everyone, even the outward regions, must be born again. Well, you know, back in the Old Testament, we're going to talk about the Old Testament just for a second here. And he said, in the Old Testament, it talked about the world at that time was just known in that particular region, Egypt. And the world was big, but history, it talks about Egypt, Israel, and them places right there. But what this lesson is expanded on when it gets done is talking about the whole world as a whole. When after God had ascended back into heaven, ascended back into heaven, He told his disciples to go out and spread the word. And that's how we got religions today all over the world. I know we got different religions and things like that, but there ain't no one religion that gets you to heaven and the rest of them don't get you to heaven. I want to make that plain to you right now. There's good people in all churches that has got a good heart. They've got a good heart, and they may not see things eye to eye to you or any other religion. They may get discussions about the religion, and they talk about it sometimes. How these people are not going to go to heaven. These people are not going to heaven. Well, I'm not going to say that to no religion. You can't do that. You judge them when you do that. When you ask the Lord into your life, that's a personal relationship between you and God. Nobody else. Just you and God. And if you feel like if you want to go to the Turkey Creek Free Will Baptist Church and you're satisfied with it, that's fine.
That's where you need to be.
That's where you need to be, because that's where God is sending you to be. And sometimes you will even leave that church and go to another church even. You know, it depends on the individual.
That's fine, Brother Joe, as long as God's the one leading.
That's right.
You know,
As long as God's in the picture.
I can't go to no regular Baptist just because I got mad at Brother Joe and Brother Steve.
That's right. You know.
I condemn myself right then.
If you leave a church over being mad at somebody, you're leaving on the wrong intentions. Now, I'm not saying you may be a person that's driving a long way to go to church every Sunday, you know. And they are people driving a long way to go to the churches, things like that. And you say, well, I need to find me another little church that's a little closer to home. I'm getting a little older, or I'm doing this, or I'm doing that. If God's leading you to leave where you're at and go to another church, as long as you're doing what God's will is, and you're in relationship with God, it don't make no difference. You know. But you're not supposed to leave a church because somebody hurt your feelings. I'll put it that way. Hurt your feelings. You ain't just because you get your feelings hurt, and everybody gets their feelings hurt. You know, I don't care who it is. In this fleshly body we got right here, we've all got feelings. And sometimes you may say something to somebody, or somebody might say something to you, but it will bear on your mind, you know.
And that's when you need to go to that person and them alone.
Yeah, them alone, you're right, and talk to the person about it, you know.
And hopefully you can settle.
And if that person says to you, let's just use an example. Let's say that somebody in the church said something to you or hurt your feelings some way. You go to that person and you explain to them by themselves, and you say, brother or sister one, you kind of hurt my feelings the other day. You said this, you said that. And the person that you're talking to should tell you right off the bat, well, I'm sorry I hurt your feelings. I didn't intend to do that. A good Christian person is going to do that.
Absolutely.
And they will take and say, you hurt my feelings. And it's up to that person. Once you've made it open to that person, it's up to them to ask for forgiveness and overhurt your feelings. You see what I'm getting at? Or it could be the other way around. You could be on either side of the fence there when you start talking about something like that. Okay, I just wanted to kind of get started on that little bit of the lesson right there. And we're going to be talking about Nicodemus in this lesson today. He said, there was a man of the Pharisees named Nicodemus, a ruler of the Jews. He was a person that was high in society, you might say. He had money, he had wealth. He had wealth, and he had all kinds of stuff going on with him, and he was in a high position. Being in a high position don't get you to heaven just because you're in a high position. People think that way. Hey, I do this, or I'm that way, or that way. But that's not how it is. It said that was in verse 1, number 1 right there. And then he went to verse 4 right here. It says, Nicodemus said unto him. Well, let me go before I say that about Nicodemus. And when Nicodemus first told that he was a ruler of the Jews, he had a conversation with Jesus Christ. And when he had that conversation with Jesus Christ, Jesus had told him in verse 2, 3, and 3 that he had to be born again. Well, he didn't have that understanding. That'd be just like us if there wasn't no religions around, and that's probably the wrong way to say it, but if there ain't no religions around, and it come down to you, and the Lord said you had to be born again, well, you got to have an understanding that you're going to look at it kind of like Nicodemus did. How can I be born again? How can I do this? So right here it says, Nicodemus said unto him, how can a man be born again when he is old? Can he enter the second time into his mother's womb and be born? Well, that's a good question if somebody asked you that, if you was thinking about it. And Jesus answered and told him, he said, verily, verily, I say unto thee, except a man be born of water and of the Spirit, he cannot enter into the kingdom of God. Now we're going to stop right there. We're going to talk about the water part of it here. That's where the baptismal part comes in. Just like John the Baptist baptized Jesus in the water. But this thing we're talking about right here is when you were born, when you've got a fleshly body coming, you're being born fleshly. They talk about it over in this lesson. If you read it, that they were probably, now I'm not saying they were for sure, they were probably talking about when a child is born and the water breaks and you are born, in biblical, the water breaks.
You was actually submerged.
That you was submerged all the time. You was in your mom's belly, So that is basically the way that they were looking at a fleshly body being born, and then a spiritual body being born is when you turn your life over to Jesus Christ and you say, Lord, forgive me my sins and come into my life. Then that is the spiritual part of you. That's the second birth that you're going to have is your spiritual birth. Okay.
And I'm going to comment just a little bit on the baptism part, the water part. You got so many people say, well, you don't really need to be baptized when you're born again. But there's two places I know of for certain. Jesus got baptized.
Jesus did get baptized.
Show us what to do.
Yeah.
Now right here it says you must be water. How did it say it?
The second time, I see right here.
Born of water
and of the Spirit.
Now, I don't know about be baptized.
You should want to be baptized. I'll agree with you 100% on that.
And I believe you will if you truly got saved.
If you truly got saved, I believe you will.
And the second thing is you want to tell people.
You want to tell people. And the third thing that you get the point is there are some people that turns their life over to Jesus. I like to say on their deathbed. You know, they don't live a few days. Well, we don't know whether that person actually turned their body, you know, but you got the comfort of knowing that if you got a loved one and they're about ready to die and a pastor or somebody comes in and starts explaining to him that they need to be saved, you know, that they need to go and ask the Lord. And if they accept the Lord into their life, even though they're in that hospital bed, yeah, I believe in Jesus Christ, and I believe, you know, that He died for our sins. He said, and there's some people that turn their life over to the Lord, even in a hospital position where they're not going to get out of the hospital, and they are so convinced that they need to be born again, that they actually take them and put them in these little whirlpool things and baptize them in their beds or whatever, you know. I know some religions, they baptize you with just sprinkling. They call that sprinkling, you know. And that. Well, I believe I honestly, God, believe if you're in a hospital room and you're in a position where you're not going to be there for a day or two. If that satisfies you to be baptized that way, it's okay.
My Uncle Ernest was put in a sling.
Was what now?
Was put in a sling.
Yeah.
You know, these things they use to get you up out of the bed with and stuff. He was put in one of them in Pilot Methodist Hospital and was baptized in their baptistry that they had.
Yeah.
And that's how he was baptized.
Well, if that's the way, but when we're talking about baptism on this like that, we got to go all the way back to when Jesus was crucified and the two thieves. When He told the one thief that he asked for forgiveness, and what did the Lord tell him? Said you'll be with me in paradise. Well, he wasn't baptized.
And that tells us.
He was in a position that he was going to be dead in just a little while anyway.
And you know, that also tells us that if you have the opportunity to be baptized.
Yeah, that's what it comes down to.
Yeah, if you have the opportunity. That guy didn't have the opportunity.
He didn't have that opportunity. He was nailed up on.
Faith.
Yeah.
You know, that's built on ways.
Yeah.
It's everything, really.
Has everything to do with, you know, the situation you're in. And some people waste all their life until the point of death before they make a decision, where they really actually make a decision. And it gives your family comfort and people around you the comfort to know that you've asked the Lord into your life. You know, my dad was very sick when he asked the Lord into his life. You know, but I got comfort of knowing that he's going to be in heaven. You know, because he asked the Lord into his life. You know, and just like Susan said here last week when she's talking about her dad, he was in the hospital. Wade was his name. And Wade, I worked with Wade. Wade never thought about the Lord all his whole life. And you know, Wade was a good person, but he was a lost person. And she said that you could see the change in him whenever a pastor or whoever come in over and talked to him, and he accepted the Lord into life. She said you could see a change in him immediately.
Absolutely.
You know, but he still never got a chance to be baptized. You know.
Well, he was okay because he didn't have to change.
Well, that's true. That's kind of like a thief on the cross. You know, if you get in that position right there. Okay. Jesus said in verse 5, says, Jesus answered, Verily, verily, I say unto thee, except a man be born of water and of the Spirit, he cannot enter into the kingdom of God. And the next verse says, That which is born of flesh is flesh, and that which is born of spirit is spirit. Marvel not that I say unto thee, ye must be born again. When you get down, and what Jesus was talking to Nicodemus, and he was talking to Nicodemus, and he's telling him that he must be born again. And he explained to him that the second birth was a spiritual birth. That is a spiritual birth, your second birth is.
Yep.
you know, and go on down to verse 13 says, and no man has ascended up into heaven, but he that came down from heaven, even the Son of Man which is in heaven. Okay. And as Moses lifted, now I'm gonna get into that in a minute. I'm gonna stop right there, and then we're gonna go to get to Moses about the serpent here in a few minutes about that. I'm gonna change this page over here and start read the introduction here. It says, of all the interviews with the Savior, the one recorded for us in John 3 must be the most familiar. I'd say that is one of your very most familiar, I mean, in the introductory part of it there. I say that is one of your most familiar ones when you've heard preachers preach on it time and time again about Nicodemus, about being saved, and he told him that he was going to be that he had to be baptized. You know, he didn't say he had to be baptized. He said the Christians. He says right here, says. Here Christ used the metaphor of salvation that had become one of the most popular ways of discussing redemption. He told Nicodemus, you must be born again. Well, what we've been talking about here right now, Brother Will, is we've been talking about being born again. Born again is accepting the Lord into your life. You're a sinner, you accept the Lord into your life, and you are going to, you are asking the Lord to come into your life. And if you're in a position to do it, most people will be baptized. Most people will. I'd say 99.9% of them will be baptized. You know, he said you must be born again. Well, that's the second birth that we're talking about there. You are going from a fleshly birth to a spiritual birth. That's what you.
Brother Joe, my brother Neil. And I'll hush in a minute, let you go on.
That's all right.
But my brother Neil, he was in a car wreck. And Tim Klein and his boy Matt was with him. And Neil knew he was dying. And he told Tim, he said, oh my God, Tim, I'm going to die. And he made a confession. He believed that Jesus saved his soul and everything. But he died, he couldn't get a chance to be baptized.
He didn't get a chance to be baptized.
Tim said he did confess him by now.
Yeah.
The only thing is he just didn't get the opportunity to be baptized.
Yeah.
And you know, my daddy was really upset about it. And until Tim told him that Neil had made a confession. And Daddy was okay with it then.
Yeah.
You know, that put his
Well, I mean,
mind at ease.
that's the understanding that people has to get. Now, I'm not encouraging people to wait till they're just about ready to die to get saved. I'm not saying that. When the Lord speaks to you, whether you're a young person or a middle-aged person or whatever it is, when the Lord speaks to you and you accept Jesus into your life, that is good. You know, and if you are in a position to be baptized, or I hate to say it that way again, but you know, some churches, they sprinkle people. You know, sprinkle. Which I'm not saying it's wrong, I'm not saying it's good. They're using water as a symbol to being buried in sin and raised up as a Christian, you know. That's about the only way I can see it. I mean, I hear people all the time talk about, I don't hear it all the time, people talk about, well, they sprinkle them in that church, they do. Well, it ain't the sprinkling part that saves you. It ain't the going in the water it actually saves you. You accept the Lord into your life before that even happens, you know. And people's got to get the understanding there and get away from whether you actually get baptized or whether you don't get baptized. It's what you believe whenever you said, Lord, forgive me my sins and come into my life. That's the whole ball game right there when you get right down talking about it. Now, that's the way I feel about it. And I will accept that, you know, whatever somebody... I don't know what's in Will's heart, or I don't know what's in Ann's heart, or I don't know what's in Barbara's heart back there. You know, I don't know what, you know, if they was actually saved or they wasn't saved. But I feel like they were saved. You all were saved because you attend church regularly. You do the right thing. You're a good person. So, but now, when you ask the Lord into your life, and you go in and you go through the process of even being baptized, and then you never go back to church again, I can't say that person is lost because I don't know their heart. But they don't let their light shine, you might say. They don't do what most people that like we are. We attend church regularly, to be with our brothers and sisters, and we try to do the right thing, and we want to do the right thing. But that person, where they may be watching evangelists on TV, I don't know, and they may be reading their Bible at home. It's not up to us to say, well, that person got baptized and we ain't never seen them back in church. That's been 3 years ago, and we never did come back to church. Well, you don't know what they may have went somewhere else to church, And if they did, that's fine. If they didn't, it's between that person and the Lord when you get right down and talk about right there. Okay. If we do nothing else in this lesson, let's try to grasp the meaning of the Lord has in mind when he uses this gripping phrase. When he's talking about you must be born again. That's what we're basically talking about here is how people get saved. Now, and don't let somebody try to tell you that you need to do this or you need to do that. You know in your heart, and Lord knows in your heart, if you was actually saved or not. I definitely feel like I'm saved because once I got baptized, well, not once I got baptized, once I asked the Lord into my life, it just changed me almost instantly, buddy. I wanted to go out and tell people, everybody at work or when I meet them, I talk to them about the Lord, and you just got to have that understanding right here. And it says right here, let's go on down here to the opening conversation. What time need it be? Anyone who studies the life of Jesus will be impressed with the broad spectrum of humanity, which was drawn to him. Nicodemus represented the leadership of a region of the world in this day. John made two important remarks about him in John 3:1. He was a Pharisee. That's the first thing he told him. He was a Pharisee. He was a person that was up in standards, you might say. I don't know if the Pharisees was Jewish or not. I'm not sure about that right there. Okay, this is John made two important. Okay, the first was his Pharisee. This was a section of Judas that sprang up during the intertestamental period. They were determined to observe the law, but somewhere along the way, this worldly devotion turned into fascination. By the time Christ encountered them, he would condemn them for observing the letter of which, while disobeying the spirit of the law. Christ had come with a message of relief for the anxiety of men like Nicodemus, men who undoubtedly felt some system of works, but necessarily to be right with God. Nicodemus was a guy that he was like I said, he was a leader he was a leader in the Pharisees, but he was in a high position. He had money. He had fame. He was looked up to. That's about the best way you can look at it. And said, second, we are also told that Nicodemus was a ruler of the Jews. That meant that he was the person in position to, he'd be in the highest part of the government in their day and time where he was at. What he said went. That's the way you have to look at it that way. That he was a person that was in that position to where what he said, he was the Sanhedrin courts is he talked a little bit about here. Second, he was also, Nicodemus was a ruler of the Jews. This meant that he was a member of the Sanhedrin, the highest government group of Judas. This would automatically mean social standings would imply that Nicodemus was a relatively wealthy man. One of the most important truths which we can learn from the encounter between Nicodemus and Christ. Is that power, wealth, and position does not impress God. God is not there for how if you got money and you can't buy your way into heaven. There ain't no way you can buy his way into heaven.
Nicodemus could have
You can't.
He could have told people to do anything he wanted. And they would do it.
Yeah.
Or they would give him anything he wanted or what have you. But he couldn't buy his salvation,
He couldn't buy his salvation.
you know.
Salvation is something that you have to earn. You get your salvation is when you come under conviction and you say, Lord, forgive me my sins and come into my life. Then you earn it by being faithful.
Right.
It don't make no difference if you got money or if you don't have money. You know. Let's see right here. One of the most important which we can learn from this encounter between Nicodemus and Christ is the power of wealth, the position. He does not impress God. All of these things and more were true of Nicodemus, and yet Christ still said, you must be born again. You have to be born again. That's just simple as that. If you go, take me for instance. I was a good person, or I thought I was a good person, but I hadn't asked the Lord in my life. You know, I was a sinner, not saved by grace. I wasn't saved, you know. My wife had got saved. She'd been a Christian for several years, but occasionally I would go to church with her when she first got saved. And it comes on you when your salvation, he can start working with you. Your salvation can start working with you maybe a month, 2 months in advance. You know, you start thinking about God more. Maybe you pick the Bible up, you'll read the Bible, or maybe you'll start going to church somewhere. And you're the Lord is working with you, trying to get you, I'm going to say trying, the Lord is working with you to get you prepared so that when you do ask the Lord into your life, if you do ask the Lord into your life, that you'll be a good Christian person, you know. And then just like that Sunday that I got saved here, man, I think about that all the time. I said about how they give an altar call that day, and I just sat back there, you know. But I'd been under conviction. I'd started going to church, you know, and I didn't get up that morning and say, I'm gonna go up to our church. I'm gonna join that church. I'm gonna ask the Lord to come in my life. He wouldn't even know my mind when I went to church that morning. And even after the altar call was given, and we all went out here and they turned the lights out. Until Brother Dede said to me, he said, would you like to go in there and pray? And I guess that's where the Lord really got to me, to the point where I said, yeah, I believe I want to go back in there. And when I got back up here at this altar, all I know to do is get on my knees and say, Lord, forgive me my sins and come into my life. It's that simple. It's that simple to get saved. What you do after you've asked the Lord into your life is up to you. If you actually, I believe if you actually got saved at that time, I believe that you'll be under conviction to the point where you will want to do the right thing all the time, you know. But, you know, and I believe it, you know, in my heart, you know, I mean, like I said, I wasn't a bad person, and I didn't have a whole lot to give up. I didn't drink, but I did cuss. I was pretty bad about cussing, but, you know, and occasionally something will slip out now, but it's not nothing real bad. What's the Bible say about Christians? We sin daily, every one of us, you know.
But we have an advocate with the Father.
Huh?
But we have an advocate.
We've got an advocate with God. He's our lawyer. That's you might say. He's the advocate with God. If you do something that you're not supposed to be doing, and you say, Lord, forgive me my sin that I just committed, Lord will go to God. He'll say, Lord, this is one of mine right here. He said he asked the Lord. He has to come to you through me. He's one of mine. Okay. Anyone who studies the life of Christ will be impressed with the broad spectrum of humanity, which was drawn in him. Nicodemus represented the leaders of a religious world in that day. John made two important remarks about that. Well, I done read that part. I don't know what I'm doing here. Anyway, let's get back to Nicodemus right here. And Nicodemus, while he didn't know what the Lord meant about being saved. He couldn't understand it. You know, he just didn't know. Well, that would be the same way for us if the Lord was to be talking to us and we was in those days. We would have the same questions. Said let me see where it's at right now. I'm going to go down here to almost the bottom of the page on this page 18 right here. It says, this is undoubtedly played off a question that Nicodemus had raised in verse 4. He wanted to understand the how of being born again. Christ seemed to be saying, how is not nearly as important as to why. You know, why he was wanting to know, well, how can I be saved? How can I do this? It's not as important as knowing why you're doing this. And to be judged, his earnestness is when. When should you? How, why, and when. Well, he had that first question there. He was all mixed up about being born again. You know, how can I go back into my mom's womb? How can I be born this? He was looking at Jesus Christ and saying, I can't. There ain't no physical way I can do this. But then Jesus goes into the process of telling him that he had to be spiritually born. You know, that's a different thing about being spiritually born and being born into the world. Okay. And when? When is when you come under conviction and ask the Lord into your life. That there's a when right there. You know, just like me when I walked up, I went outside out there and I come back in here. I didn't know how to pray. Well, what did I do when I got on my knees right there? First thing I said is, Lord, I'm a sinner. Come in, you know, forgive me my sins and come into my life. That's all it takes right there to anybody. So that right there is very important when you think about it. You know how you can. What time is it getting to be? People starting to show up. I need to get. Okay, now I'm going to talk a little bit about. I'm going to go to this on page 19. The elaboration of Jesus. The elaboration of Jesus by Jesus. Okay. And he's going to talk about two different situations here. Jesus is going to talk about two different situations here. He says, now it comes to the most familiar part of the great encounter of Christ, beginning with the statement, followed by the illustrations from the Old Testament. Now, when the Old Testament was due, Jesus Christ wasn't with us at that time. The Old Testament, in the Old Bible, Moses had... I don't know if I say had control, but Moses was a chosen person that God had picked to lead his people out of Egypt, you know, lead them to the thing, and he was the one that they looked up to, you know. When we talk about there in the Old Testament right here, it says, and he talked about the mission of the Son of Man. He was sent from heaven, and he would parallel this experience with Moses' serpent of brass. If you go back in the Old Testament and you go to Numbers 21, it will tell you in the Old Testament there how the people were being bitten by snakes, serpents. It was snakes or serpents. They were being bitten by snakes and they was dying. Well, Moses goes to Jesus, not Jesus, goes to God, and he has an encounter with God. And God, what did God tell Moses to do? He told him to build a brass serpent and put it on a pole. And when he told him to put that brass serpent on a pole, he said, you tell the people that gets bitten, if they'll look at the serpent, that they will be okay. You know. Well, that's the same way it is with us about Jesus Christ. We look to the cross. Yeah. Same difference. You know. Once Jesus Christ come on the scene, that's our thing, looking at the cross. We'll be okay if we're a Christian people and we look to the cross. Well, we'll be okay. Okay. He was sent to heaven and would parallel these experiences with Moses about the serpent. Okay. Nicodemus would have known that the children of Israel who had been bitten by the fiery serpents had only to look upon the brass serpents to be healed. From our perspective, we really see that the reference is to the cross. Just what we was talking about there. It would not have been that clear to Nicodemus. Nicodemus was he come to Jesus of a night. He said that he come to him of a night. He was a person was under conviction, but he didn't want the other people that was Sanhedrins and things to know that he was under conviction. He sure didn't. He did. That's why he went and had encounters with Jesus of a night. I guess he was afraid that, kind of paraphrase here. I guess he was afraid that the people would look down on him if he was to ask Jesus into their life. Which they might have. You don't know that back in the day. But he come under that conviction. I don't know if it actually says in the Bible that. I don't know if it says in the Bible that Nicodemus actually did get saved. I don't know that. I would think maybe that he did, because he was probably a person of pretty high intelligence and stuff like that. Okay. So just as the children of Israel looked upon the brass serpents in faith, Jesus comments in verse 15 that is simply faith in the Son of Man, which is the doorway to eternal life. That's the doorway that we got when we were born into this life, in this fleshly body. That's the doorway to our salvation, is by asking the Lord into your life, and you're saved by the grace, living by the faith, with the hope that you're going to make it to heaven. And see, salvation by grace points to God's love. The depth of that love causes Him to give His Son the breadth of love that's seen in the world whosoever, and is intended of that love is seen in the fact that Christ's mission was not to condemn but to save. Jesus Christ didn't come to this earth to condemn people. We're already condemned, each and every one of us. He didn't come here, but he come to save anybody and everybody that was willing to ask the Lord into their life, to live a Christian life, that they'll have eternal life when this life is past. Okay. Finally, in verse 19 and 20, it says, there was an echo in the prodigy where John had written, the light, he commented that the darkness compelled it not. Bible scholars know that the word comprehend can mean overcome. Here in John 3:19-21, we find the inspiration illustrated in that truth. Christ's message of judgment is, however, mingled with hope. Those things truly will come to the light. Well, that's what we're getting at right there. Whenever when we're born in the darkness. You're born in sin, and in order to come out of the sin, to come out of the sin, you got to come out of the darkness. You got to. See, the Bible says that Jesus Christ is the light. Well, how do you get out of darkness? You turn a light on. If we come in this building here, it don't have no windows in here, and if you had never been in this building here and you come in here, you'd be feeling everywhere you went to trying to see where you're at and what you're doing in here. But if you turn that light on, it's instantly, it's clear to you. Okay. It says either the light of life or the darkness of death. The choice is yours. That's our own choice, each and every one of us. If we're going to ask the Lord into your life and you live a Christian life and do the right thing, you come out of the darkness into the light. But if you don't ever darken the doors of a sanctuary, or not necessarily that even, but if you don't ever ask the Lord into your life, you're going to stay in the darkness. You're going to die in sin. Simple as that. Okay, what time is it getting to be? Okay, I'm going to do a couple questions here, and then we're going to quit this lesson. Why do you think Nicodemus' story is included in this scripture? Tell how the 3 times he appeared in the Gospel of John. Well, I've been on so many things, I probably done mentioned it all right here. Why do you think Nicodemus' story is included in this scripture? What Jesus Christ was telling Nicodemus is he was telling him what he had to do to get saved. You know, Nicodemus couldn't understand that because God had said that you must be born again. Well, Nicodemus noted when he asked the question there, he said, how can a man be born again? How can he enter his mother's womb again? Well, we all know we can't do that, each and every one of us are. But God was speaking spiritually. He was telling him he had to be born again. He was telling him he would have to ask the Lord into his life, and he would, if he asked the Lord into his life, that was a spiritual birth right there. Now, I didn't talk about it over here a while ago, but I'm going to mention it right here now. When we talk about spiritual birth, the way to look at that is a spiritual birth is kind of like the wind. When you see the wind, when you can see what the wind is doing, you know, you can see trees and leaves are moving or stuff like that, or if it's a hard wind, it could blow a roof off a house or whatever you want to say. But you can look at it that way, but in reality, you don't know what the wind is or how it does. All you do is feel it. You know, that's the way your spiritual life is. When you become associated with Jesus Christ and you ask the Lord into your life, you are a born-again person. You are spiritually born. You ain't physically born. You're spiritually born. And that means that if you will continue to do what you're supposed to be doing and follow Jesus like you're supposed to be doing, and I believe it, most people who become Christians, I believe they're okay, you know. But now there will be a few that drops through the crack, you know. I hate to say it that way, but that's between that person and Jesus, you know. It ain't between this world that we live in today and things that goes on in this world today. There's so much goes on that is tied into sin that it's really hard, you know, to stay true to Jesus, if you think about it. But I watch this guy on TV every morning, on Sunday morning. I watch him on Sunday morning, and after his program is over with, it bothers me right now. For the first commercial that comes on after his service is over with is they have got this guy on there that comes on there and starts talking about gambling. The first commercial after that thing, and I don't think that commercial should even be in there. Because if you think about what they're playing on is they're playing on the people that are Christ-like, going out and gambling. You know, and when do they get that opportunity to try to influence their gambling habits, except on Sunday mornings? Because you see a lot of people on Sunday morning that they watch a service and this commercial comes on there, and you'd be surprised how it entices some people to get on their phone and start doing this and start doing that and start gambling. You know, and they're leading them away from Jesus Christ by doing that. I thought about calling the radio station, the TV station, talk to them about it, but that really bothers me. It really does. You know, how a person can, you know, you're out sit there and listen to somebody give a good service there, and then the next thing comes on there, then they start talking about gambling. You know.
But that brings you all to the $90.
Yeah, well, I don't know if people look at it like I do, but
that commercial funded that show, you know, but it ain't right.
It ain't right. You know it ain't right.
No.
You know, because you ain't. You got the people focused this way, but then you're trying to focus them in another direction, back out into sin. You know, and I don't think it's right. It's just, why do you think Nicodemus came to Jesus at night? Why did he come to Jesus at night? Well, he come to him at night because he was a person of a high position that ruled the people. That he thought that if he come to him during the day, they would rebel against him, you know. And he was under conviction. If he wouldn't have been under conviction, he wouldn't have come to Jesus at night. Okay. Why do you think Nicodemus addressed Jesus as rabbi? Well, rabbi means master or something like that right there. Well, he was, like I said, he was under conviction. I believe he was under conviction, and he wanted to present himself in a position to where he knew who was in control. You know, that's why he asked him that there. What did Jesus mean when he told Nicodemus a person must be born again? Well, we talked about the whole lesson today about being born again, and how we have to be born again in order to be a saved person. It's a spiritual birth. It's not no birth of being born again. It's spiritually that you're born again. Okay. What do you think this statement confused Nicodemus? Well, Nicodemus was a person that was he had a good education. I say he did. He's in a position to where he was at the highest authority of the people, and he had a good position. He understood but he couldn't comprehend how you had to be born again. He asked Jesus the question, how can I be born again? I can't enter my... And Jesus went to the point to tell him, in order to be born again, he had to have a spiritual birth. That's the whole point right there. You've got to be spiritually born. Do you believe Nicodemus was a follower of Christ? Now, we talked about that in the first. Evidently, he don't talk a whole lot about Nicodemus here, and I hope I'm not getting people confused right here, but evidently, by him coming to him, it don't make no difference whether it's in the daytime or nighttime or whatever it is. I don't know whether he got saved or whether he didn't get saved. Brother Mike, did
he was a Pharisee.
He was a Pharisee.
So he was a religious leader already. I'd say he wasn't willing to give up that status but he was very curious about Jesus and what he could do. The miracles. Remember, he came to him asking the first thing about miracles. And Jesus went in and began going.
Right. Well, I told William right there earlier in the program here where we talking about Nicodemus. I said I don't know if Nicodemus ever actually got saved or not, because it don't say in the Bible that he got saved.
I'd say after the resurrection, there's a lot of hearts changed.
I'd say so too. Okay, that's the last question here, and it's 53 after, so we'll stop the lesson right there, and
Good lesson.
we'll pick up one again.